In 2022, Elon Musk used part of his Tesla stock as collateral for a multi-billion-dollar loan to help fund his acquisition of Twitter. He didn't have to liquidate his entire stake to raise the cash. He borrowed against it instead. For most people, debt is the thing that keeps them up at night. For the ultra-wealthy, debt can work completely differently. Not as a burden, but as a tool for accessing money without giving up ownership. To understand how that works, we have to start before someone is actually a billionaire. At the exact moment debt begins behaving differently for the wealthy than it does for everyone else. 7 levels. 7 completely different relationships with owing money. Let's get into it. Level 1, $1 million to $10 million. The entry point. This is where borrowing first starts to look strategic instead of desperate. At this level, someone is usually wealthy on paper. Equity in a company, real estate, a growing portfolio, but not yet cash rich. So when they need money for a home, a business expense, a tax bill, they borrow against what they own instead of selling it. The loan is modest by wealthy standards, $1 to $10 million, but it solves a real problem. Selling an asset early can trigger tax, signal weakness to investors, or shrink a stake they're not ready to give up. This is the first version of a strategy that gets more powerful at every level that follows. But once the underlying assets grow past 10 million, that strategy starts scaling into something else entirely. Level 2, $10 million to $100 million. The leverage play. At this level, debt becomes deliberate. This is someone actively using borrowed money to expand real estate, a second business, a new investment. The loans are structured with help from a financial team, often the first version of a family office. Interest rates are negotiated. Repayment is planned years out. The debt isn't a weight, it's a lever. Money borrowed to acquire assets expected to grow faster than the interest owed. It's the same logic behind an ordinary mortgage, just at a scale where the numbers stop feeling real. But cross the 100 million mark, and debt stops being just about acquiring things. It starts becoming a way to hold on to what you already have without triggering a tax bill. Level 3, $100 million to $1 billion, the stock-backed loan. This is the level people have actually heard of, even if they don't know the mechanics. At this tier, wealthy individuals routinely borrow against stock instead of selling it. The logic is simple. Selling stock generally triggers capital gains tax on the appreciation. Borrowing against it doesn't, because legally nothing has been sold. Financial reporting has documented this pattern among some of the world's richest people for years, sometimes called buy, borrow, die. Assets are bought, loans are taken against them instead of selling, and the debt is often settled later by the estate, sometimes at a more favorable tax position than a sale during the person's lifetime would have created. The loan sits there, serviced by interest payments, while the underlying stock, ideally, keeps compounding. It isn't guaranteed. If the stock drops far enough, the lender can demand more collateral or force a sale to cover the loan. The strategy works best when the assets keep climbing, and it carries real risk when they don't. It isn't hidden and it isn't illegal. It's simply a strategy that only becomes available once someone has hundreds of millions in assets to borrow against. Past $1 billion, though, this stops being personal finance. It becomes institutional. Level 4, $1 billion to $10 billion, the institutional debt. At this level, the debt usually isn't even in the individual's name anymore. It sits inside holding companies, trusts, and investment vehicles they control. Private banks compete for this business. A billionaire at this tier isn't applying for a loan. They're being pitched by wealth management divisions built specifically to lend at this scale, often at rates far below what an ordinary borrower could access. The debt funds acquisitions, expansion, entire new ventures. And because the underlying assets are so large and diversified, Lenders often treat the debt as relatively low risk, even when the amount involved could fund a major public infrastructure project. Past 10 billion, the scale of borrowing starts to resemble something closer to sovereign finance than personal wealth. Level 5, $10 billion to $50 billion, approaching sovereign scale. At this tier, the kind of debt someone could theoretically carry starts approaching the scale of a mid-sized country's annual borrowing. Exact figures at this level are rarely made public. Most ultra-wealthy borrowing happens privately, through banks that don't disclose loan terms, but the mechanics stay the same as the level before, just scaled up. A loan this size would still look conservative relative to a net worth many multiples larger, which is exactly why lenders are willing to extend it. Managing debt at this scale would take teams of bankers, tax attorneys, and risk analysts, essentially building private infrastructure that mirrors what a central bank uses, just around one person's balance sheet. Past 50 billion, we're no longer talking about a well-tested strategy. We're talking about scale almost nobody has actually operated at, in public view or otherwise. Level 6, $50 billion to $100 billion, where the models break down. Very few people in history have carried debt anywhere near this scale. At this level, both the potential debt and the wealth backing it are so large that ordinary risk models start to strain. That doesn't mean the risk disappears. Falling stock prices can still trigger demands for more collateral, and a steep enough decline can still force a sale. What changes is the margin for error. Assets this diversified, spread across enough markets and asset classes, are less likely to be hit by a single downturn all at once. Less likely, not immune. At this point, debt stops behaving like a temporary liability and starts behaving like a permanent fixture on the balance sheet, renewed and restructured, rather than paid down the way an ordinary loan would be. Past 100 billion, we leave anything with real precedent behind. Level 7, $100 billion and beyond, the Uncharted debt. This level is largely theoretical, because almost no one has carried personal debt at this scale. But the arithmetic isn't theoretical. If someone's net worth crosses into the hundreds of billions and they borrow even a modest fraction of it, the resulting debt would rival the entire annual budget of a mid-sized country. Financial regulation already governs lending at every level below this one. Banks, margin requirements, disclosure rules all exist. What doesn't really exist is real-world precedent for a single individual borrower operating at this exact scale. If someone eventually carries debt at this level, the banks behind it would be underwriting a private balance sheet larger than what most national governments manage in a year. Ending. For most people, debt is a warning sign, something to fear, something to pay off as fast as possible. For the ultra-wealthy, debt can be the opposite, a way to access liquidity while still holding onto assets that keep growing, and often without triggering the tax bill a sale would create. It isn't risk-free. It's a bet that the assets backing it will keep outrunning what's owed. The loan was never the risk. The wealth behind it was always the safety net. If this was useful, subscribe. I break down how power actually works, not how the headlines describe it. See you in the next one.